we are now ready to move from the wireframe phase into the design phase, or the design stage. So this is where we take our wireframe and now begin applying things like fonts and colors and textures and maybe some other imagery as well. So, of course, I want to address fonts here first, right off the bat. And choosing fonts is a very subjective thing because it's my belief that fonts really speak to us. So, for example, if we have a very heavy, thick font, that might convey strength or power. If we have very thin fonts, that might suggest elegance, things like this, right? So these are all things that we have to keep in mind when we're building out our layout. So, of course, we would want to ask the client, what is it that they want their website to say? Not in words, but in fonts, in colors, and in pictures, right? Maybe they want to convey superiority, or maybe they want to convey reliability, these sorts of things. So we want to find some fonts, and of course, later on, some colors and some imagery that essentially communicate those things, right? So let me show you my process anyway. And of course, I've already figured out which fonts I want to use, but let me walk you through it here. I'm going to take this text here, Y Karate, and I'm just going to duplicate him way out over onto the right-hand side just by Option or Alt dragging on him. Something like this, right? In fact, what I'll do is I'll drag him way out here so we have lots of space. And I might even duplicate this guy out a few times, again, just by Option or Alt dragging on him, something like this. And then what I would do is I would head into my character panel. So I'm going to head up to the window menu and then all the way down to type and then over to character. Okay, there we go. And then what I might do is I might grab the first guy here, maybe pull this guy up towards the top a little bit more, and pop into my drop-down menu here inside the character palette and start looking for fonts that are representative of what it is the client wants to convey, right? So I might try something like this. Sometimes I find fonts that work really well, and oftentimes what winds up happening is I wind up with a whole pile of fonts, and I usually narrow things down from there, right? So let's see, I might try some different things, maybe something like that. I'm trying to think of, fonts that might sort of, communicate sort of an Asian feel or a martial arts feel, something like that. It's close, but it isn't quite bang on. Something like this. Maybe I can see if I can find something else. Here's an example of something that would not quite work. This is much more of a sort of a country and western feel, maybe if that's what you're going for. Maybe I ask the client for some references, this sort of thing, right? Now, as I say, I've already figured out which fonts I want to use. So for myself, and I'm not expecting that you have this font on your computer, you can look for it, but maybe you have something similar. It's called Matura MT Script Capitals. Bit of a mouthful, but that's the font that I wound up using in the final layout, this guy right here. So as I say, I might wind up with a whole pile of fonts sitting over here, and I might try and narrow things down. Well, that one's too heavy. That doesn't sort of fit the sort of the Asian feel that I'm going for. This one's a little closer, but not quite right. And again, I just try and narrow it down. I might even show the client a couple of variations. All right, now as I had mentioned, I usually wind up narrowing it down to two fonts, a dominant font and then sort of a secondary font or a sub-font, if you will. So I'm going to go with the Matura MT Script Capitals. That's this fella here. And again, hopefully you can find something similar, maybe a calligraphy font or something like that. And the secondary font that I'm going to wind up with is Garamond. So I'm going to grab this second piece of text and go and find Garamond inside my list of fonts. It's actually Garamond Premiere Pro that I'm after. And oftentimes what I'll try and do is I'll try and get a font that has a couple of different flavors to it. For example, here we have a semi-bold, we have an italic, we have a semi-bold italic, and of course we have a regular as well. So this is what I wound up with for my layout. This is what I'm going to wind up using. You may want to spend a few minutes fiddling around with some different fonts to arrive at something that you think would work for you. So now that we've figured out which fonts we want to use, we can start applying them to the wireframe. But maybe before we do that, we should nail down some colors that we want to use as well. We should arrange what I would refer to as a color palette that we can work with. Let's go and check that out.